Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, I invite you all to the first sitting of the 137th Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. And we begin with item 1 of the Assembly's agenda. As we have just done over the last 2 hours, the Governing Council has unanimously decided to propose the chairperson of the Council of the Federation of Russia, Her Excellency Madam Valentina Matvienko, as President of the 137th Assembly, and request the endorsement, and I've requested the endorsement of the Assembly in accordance with its Rule 7.2. Madam Matvienko has been elected by acclamation, and she has now come to the podium, and she has taken the President's chair, and I would like to thank her for all of the support we have received, for the excellent arrangements, for the warm hospitality, and of course the warmth of the welcome that we have received from her on behalf of the people of St. Petersburg and of course the people of the Russian Federation. Madam President, it's all yours.
You want to go down there and speak to You have a speech?
Yes, I have.
You can speak from there. So
From
that
there?
They see you.
You mean for the... Да, уважаемый господин Чудхури.
Distinguished Mr. Choudhury, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you again at the plenary meeting of the Assembly. I would like to extend sincere thanks for the trust that you have accorded to me by choosing me the President of 137th Assembly of IPU. Believe me, I won't disappoint you, dear colleagues. Before we move on to considering our agenda, I would like to draw your attention to the following thing, as it always is in IPU. I'm hopeful that our work will be will be conducted in the spirit of trust and mutual understanding, and in this connection I would like you to be correct in your interventions and be respectful to each other. Now I would like to move on to our agenda. As you know, item 2 of the agenda is the consideration of the requests for emergency items to be considered at the Assembly. I would like to remind you that item 2 will be considered today in this hall at 5 p.m. Item 3 of the agenda means that we're going to have a general debate on the theme promoting cultural pluralism through peace and peace through interfaith and interethnic dialogue. And I would like to make my statement on this issue. I would like to say that our Russian philosopher Nikolai Rerich, he is a painter, was at the same time, he made a gift in terms of what we call today cultural pluralism. He said that different manifestations of culture are the manifestations of just a tree, the roots of the tree which supports the whole world, and we should be stuck to that. Otherwise, we would not have learned the names of Shakespeare and Cervantes, Leo Tolstoy and Marquez, Mahatma Gandhi and Ferdowsi, Libo and Nadine Gardema. It doesn't matter what ethnicity they belong to, what religion they worshipped, and their pieces of art belongs to humanity. Unfortunately, world history knows very many examples when books were burned, when pieces of architecture were destroyed and ancient cities were destroyed. The barbers of the 21st century deprived us and our next generations the opportunity to admire the statues of Buddha in Timbuktu, the masterpieces of Mosul and Palmyra, and this list could be continued. Today, the civilized world should take efforts in order to preserve this sacred tree of cultural pluralism about which Eric wrote, and save it from the risk of unifications, and on the other hand, on the attempts of extremists and those who think that there is religious and ethnic exclusiveness. And on our soil, the representatives of more than 2,000 ethnicities live, and we use 89 national languages. Among the peoples of Russia, there are advocates and champions of different religions, and at the same time, we have never had religious wars in this country. Dialogue and cooperation between the representatives of different faiths is an important condition for the development of the country. Discrimination on national and religious soil, what manifestation it takes, never mind. It is seen in the country in the most acute way. We are concerned with the situation in our neighboring country, Ukraine, where many people are discriminated, those also who belong to Orthodox Church, and they have adopted anti-democratic law on education, which diminishes the rights of ethnic minorities, and it prohibits to have lessons in their national language. The culture of interfaith cooperation has been tested by time, and the policy of multi-pluralism born lots of problems, and many countries face these problems. And one of the problems of the viability of our country is that it is based on multiculturalism. It is the free existence of ethnic cultures inside a uniform and common national community. When we speak in terms of images, our model is a bunch of field flowers. In this bunch, each flower is specific, and it differs from the bunch of roses from the greenhouse. And in order to reach such ideas, we have set up an agency on national ethnicities. We have set up the Council on Ethnic Relations, and for cooperation with ethnic communities, and members to this agency are the representatives of different religions, civil society. We have a commission on the work with religion communities, Council of International Cooperation, and we have such a committee in the upper house of our parliament, in the Council of Federation, and it helps us to improve our legislation with regard to the freedom of speech and faith. In order to participate in the thematic events in the Council of Federation, we systemically invite the representatives of different religions which exist in the Russian Federation. We have accumulated huge experience in exercising multicultural pluralism, and it helps us, perhaps we will share our best practices, and in order to choose this theme for the 137th Assembly and make it global, I propose that we conduct a global conference upon the initiative of IPU, which will be dedicated to establishing interfaith and inter-civilizational dialogue. And this conference might be held upon the auspices of UN with the participation of state leaders and religion leaders, and in order to establish better relations between national parliaments. So I would like to propose to address the Committee on Human Rights to prepare a thematic report on this issue. Once again, my colleagues, I would like to wish all the delegates successful work. I'm convinced that parliamentarians play a special role in the process of establishing dialogue and maintaining dialogue between peoples. Within the framework of the discussion, we will share best practices in building interfaith and international cooperation. We will exchange views on establishing intercultural dialogue and work out common approaches to resolution of such problems. I'm convinced that this discussion will be fruitful and exciting. I propose that we embark on our work. As you know, on the platform of IPU, it has become a common thing that we highlight these issues with engagement of young people and gender equality. And I would like to start with giving the floor to Ms. Al-Haroussi from Oman, second deputy head of Bureau for Women Parliamentarians, to open this session. Ms. Al-Haroussi, the floor is yours. Please come to the podium.
Martin, the time is 6 minutes.
Mr. President, Ms. Matvienko, Chairperson of the Council of Federation and President of the 177 IPU Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Ms. Osuru, President of the Forum of Young MPs of the IPU, Ms. Rita Itzhak Ndia, Member of the UN Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to debate interfaith and interethnic dialogue. Dialogue is a word that perfectly defines what the IPU stands for. It is the quintessence of democracy and a pathway to peace. A true dialogue acknowledges all differences in order to find common ground. Colleagues, for any dialogue to be genuine, it must be inclusive. There can be no dialogue if half of the community, if half of the humanity is left aside. And yet, all too often, those who sit at the negotiating table are all men. Let us accept no more excuses to that. We know that peace can only be sustained if women are engaged in every step of the way. And we have a legal framework to make that possible. UN Security Council Resolution 1325. 1325 is extremely relevant to the work that we do as parliamentarians, and it is within reach. 1325 is about engaging women, all women, including women and the grassroots at the front lines, and hearing what they have to say. What they have to tell us is incredible importance, especially when it comes to building peace, understanding and resilience in our societies. 1325 is also about doing all it takes to empower women in all areas. This brings me to the second point. The agenda for interfaith and interethnic dialogue must be an agenda for gender equality. All representatives of ethnic or religious groups must uphold the principle of equality. Equality and women's human rights are non-negotiable. They are our shield against intolerance and extremism. They are what make our communities, our nations, and the world advance. Respect for gender equality is at the very basis of respect for diversity. If we forget that, we lose sight of our goal of achieving social cohesion, understanding beyond differences and peace. My third and related point is that cultural pluralism presupposes respect for the individual. We must embrace diversity within our own cultures and acknowledge the diversity among women. There is no such a thing as the woman. We are diverse, and our differences should be taken into account within our community and within society at large. In particular, minority women are often the target of hatred and stigma. That is why it is so important for them to have a say at the dialogue table, claim their rights, and contribute their unique perspective towards achieving peace and understanding. Let me conclude by calling on this Assembly to place gender equality at the heart of peace efforts and affirm that respect for women's rights and the inclusion of women must be preconditions to any form of dialogue. We must hear what women have to say about their own culture and religion. We must treasure that makes our cultures so unique and so diverse at the same time. Let us not forget that women are an essential element and vehicle of cultural pluralism and peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Al-Harousi. Сейчас я...
And now I would like to give the floor to the head of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians, Marine Asuro.
She is the daughter of Speaker Kataka of Inter-Parliamentary.
A very good morning to all of you, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Ms. Valentina Mantivieco, Chairperson of the Council of the Federation, Ms. Margaret Mesha Williams, President of the Bureau of Women Parliamentarians, Ms. Rita Isaac Ndeye, member of the UN Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, we only need to turn on the television or read the latest news to realize that inter-ethnic and interfaith dialogue are needed more than ever before. Intolerance, discrimination, and inequalities are fueling misunderstandings, conflicts, and extremism in many parts of the world. In our view, as young parliamentarians, we have 5 weapons to advance inter-ethnic and interfaith harmony. The first is dialogue. Dialogue is a strong weapon against alienation, segregation, and hate, but it comes with non-negotiable rules. Dialogue should be open, it should be inclusive, transparent, and genuine. It should leave no one behind, and it should be impartial. Tolerance is another weapon. Tolerance is not only a behavior, it's a way of being that needs to be taught, experienced, and practiced in the family, at school, in the communities, and in our institutions. Tolerance is the basis for understanding. We cannot ignore the diversity of human race. No one should be punished or abused for having a belief that is different from the majority. The fact of belonging to a certain ethnic group should not predetermine a person's place in society. Empathy is our third weapon. Images that we see on televisions of people dying, people being expelled of their homes, and people being mistreated should not become normal. Empathy for suffering of others should instead lead us to refuse to accept the suffering of people. Knowledge is another weapon. As ignorance nourishes hate, education and access to information for all is fundamental to empower openness and understanding among people beyond differences. Equality should be recognized as the fifth weapon. Promoting equal opportunities to all is an antidote to marginalization, alienation, and radicalization. It should also warrant a fair and sustainable development that is centered on people and that benefits all of them. Dear colleagues, as you know, young people are particularly exposed through online platforms to propagate from extremist ideologies and are very vulnerable to becoming alienated and radicalized. We must pay special attention to this risk and make sure that young people within our nation territories, even if they are non-citizens, even if they are migrants in irregular situations, even if they belong to ethnic and religious minorities, are not left behind. We must ensure that we provide young people with the best conditions under which they can take part in political life and make them feel that they have a voice and a place in a society. As a result, as a recent IPU research paper on linkages between youth participation and peace and security found that involving young people in parliament's decisions can help to promote social cohesion in societies affected by conflicts or political instabilities. Youth participation can even increase trust in the government to bring about social change through non-violent means. Governments, parliaments, and international organizations are increasingly using young MPs as mediators to resolve community and other conflicts, including interfaith and inter-ethnic conflicts. Here we go. As young parliamentarians of the IPU, we are ready to work together with all of you to advance peace and harmony. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Asoro. А сейчас я...
And I now am glad to present the next speaker, representative of the United Nations, Ms. Diak Indiaye. Ms. Diak Indiaye, she is member of the Committee of the United Nations on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and before She was a special rapporteur of the United Nations on minorities, and she was in charge of the implementations of a UN declaration on the elimination of discrimination against minorities and on finding ways to overcome the existing barriers to the effective realization of rights of minorities. So Ms. Ndiaye, she has great experience in this area here in Europe. With her family, she lived in a situation when she was limited in her rights. She faced discrimination because she represented a minority, the Roma people. Jack Ndiaye, you have the floor, please.
Dobre utro. Madam President, distinguished delegates, dear participants. It is a real honor and pleasure to be here today, especially in a city and country with such unbelievably rich culture and diversity, and share my thoughts with you about a topic that is so close to my heart. We live today in an increasingly connected and globalized world, with our identities becoming more complex, multi-layered, and fluid than ever before. We hold different nationalities, religions, beliefs, traditions, and cultures, which often link us not to one, but to multiple communities. We speak many languages, even at the same time. Our food and music preferences, our styles and attitudes are being inspired from all over the globe, also thanks to our interconnectedness via the internet. And very importantly, the opportunities and spaces for people from diverse backgrounds to meet, interact, co-work, form friendships, and fall in love are widening at an incredibly rapid pace. I take this from a Hungarian Christian, partly Roma, gypsy woman who lives in Dakar, married to a Senegalese Muslim senior citizen. So in this new era of closer coexistence, we must equip ourselves with the ability, knowledge, understanding, and right attitudes to live together and foster a culture of pluralism, harmony, and peace. So how can we actually do that? How can states successfully manage millions of different people on their territory? Where and at what level do we start? Luckily, science teaches us an important thing in this regard. In order to understand how the large operates, we must analyze how the smaller elements function within. Cells in the human body number in the trillions and come in all shapes and sizes. And we know that no matter the differences, cells of the body depend on one another, either directly or indirectly, to keep the body functioning as one unit. So what are the components of our society? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, society means an enduring and cooperating social group whose members have developed organized patterns of relationships through interaction with one another. So let's take a look at the level of families and our immediate environment, which includes our spouses, colleagues, extended family members, friends, neighbors, and others with whom we are managing our relationships on a daily basis. And let's turn to science again and get some tips and tricks that researchers identified as the tokens of happy and successful marriages and relationships. So let me share with you a few of these important principles. Number one, do not try to change each other. Therapists say that the most successful couples are the ones who recognize and appreciate the differences between them and their partner. Number two, revisit the past. The strongest couples have the ability to skip over the bad parts of their history and focus on positive memories and times they shared. Number three, always listen to each other and take decisions together. Yes, the importance of listening cannot be overestimated. And you might want to remember that not siding with the person your partner is venting about is key too. Number four, if problems persist, approach them differently. Wise couples know that with new and creative approaches, you can get different results. Often even minor changes in behavior, attitude, or actions make the biggest difference at the end. Number 5, a crisis does not mean a marriage is over. A crisis can indeed bring a whole new beginning. It is often out of pain that great bonds are made. And last but not least, a personal favorite advice. Love is a verb, not a feeling. Feelings like happiness will fluctuate, but real love is based on the couple's vows and commitment to stick to each other for better or for worse. So if these are prerequisites of successful interpersonal relationships, can we apply them to intercultural relations within society as large? Yes, sure, we can. Unfortunately, we are not without some help and guidance on our journey. Various agreements, standards, established rights and duties, as well as centuries of history with good and bad lessons learned, exist to guide us in how to ensure our peaceful, dignified, and successful coexistence. So let us see how the above principles are to be applied to our society as a whole. So number 1 was, do not try to change each other. Indeed, according to international norms, forcing communities to give up their distinct language, religion, culture, identity, or traditions is unlawful. Moreover, national or ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities have a right to have their identity protected and promoted by the state they live in. Good governance requires a set of legal, administrative, and territorial agreements that are made to allow peaceful and constructive group accommodation based on equality, indignity, and rights for all. Number 2 principle was, revisit the past. There is not a single country which has not gone through some forms of inter-ethnic or inter-religious clashes in its past. Tensions, conflicts, and wars tear the social fabric, cause long-lasting pain, and can make dialogue hard within and between nations. And because it is the winners who interpret and write a history, where there has been conflict, the culture, history, and traditions of the less powerful and minority groups have often been subject to distorted representations, resulting in low self-esteem within the groups and negative stereotypes toward members of the group on the part of the wider community. So we must write our history together and acknowledge the contributions of each community to our common cultural, traditional, national, and international heritage, and find the common values and commitments that keep us together. The third principle was to always listen to each other and make decisions together. Disadvantaged communities often carry limited or no political, economic, social, and media power, and are hence left out from vital discussions, so their voices often do not get heard. As the Indian writer Arundhati Roy says, and I will quote, "There is really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard," unquote. So just like in a marriage, also in public matters, we must express our own views and feelings freely and genuinely, and let others express their own freely and genuinely too, knowing that progress is only possible when parties understand and appreciate each other. Therefore, it is vital that minorities are included in all decision-making processes, including in municipal and government structures, law enforcement bodies, the judiciary, legislative bodies, criminal justice systems, and other authorities, especially when the decisions affect them. Without their participation, such bodies are less able to make vital decisions in a way that benefits the entire society, and they will also be less trusted by minorities, who might be reluctant to access them or discouraged from doing so. Number 4, if problems persist, approach them differently. It is often a matter of creative solutions that fosters dialogue and strengthens cooperation between different communities. There are myriads of political, legal, and social tools to fight against prejudice, bigotry, hatred, misrepresentation, and to reinforce respect and tolerance for each other. Young people especially should be encouraged to inspire and take such actions, as through art, social media, and their uniquely free and open interactions, they can find innovative ways to build understanding, celebrate diversity, and strengthen peace. Number 5, a crisis does not mean a marriage is over. Tensions within and between states have arisen in the past, creating a difficult political atmosphere, both nationally and internationally. However, in such times, various agreements and treaties can be established between the state and the affected communities, which should be based on universal and regional instruments relating to equality, non-discrimination and minority rights, including provisions for the settlement of disputes regarding their implementation. Transitional justice processes, truth-seeking, reparations and reforms can lay new and strengthened foundations for more inclusive and resilient societies. And last but not least, love is a verb, not a feeling. In time of peace and harmony, we must not become idle and passive, believing that it will naturally last forever. There are various triggers which in times of even slight instability can turn events rapidly worse. Therefore, we must take action actively, tirelessly, vigilantly and constantly to ensure that all members of the society feel that they are heard, included, cared for and respected. Vows and agreements that have been taken in good times must be honored and respected in troubled times as well. Let us be honest. Our challenge today in establishing true and functioning inclusive societies and cultural pluralism is not of a legal and is not of an intellectual nature. It is clear what we must do. We must ensure that there is appropriate legislation, starting from the constitutions, which lays the foundation for human rights and fundamental freedoms, which prohibits and sanctions discrimination, incitement to hatred, hate crimes, and in the worst cases, mass atrocity crimes. There must be mechanisms available to hold perpetrators of such crimes accountable. Inclusive bodies and institutions must be established that are in charge of intercultural dialogue, minority protection, and have the authority to develop necessary integration and affirmative action policies, programs, and actions with the required budgets. Minorities must be part of decision-making bodies and should have secured representations in the parliaments. We are aware of the need of inclusive educational curriculums that highlight the values, cultures, and contributions of the different communities to our national heritage and society, as well as the importance of human rights education and development of critical thinking. It is clear that we need smarter immigration policies that do not put thousands of persons in otherwise preventable dangers, and which do not push many receiving countries to respond so harshly and insensitively. We are aware that public figures and opinion leaders must act as role models and publicly reject any signs and manifestations of intolerance at the earliest possible stage. We know all this. So I repeat, our challenges are not legal or intellectual. International legal norms and standards are clear, and we are aware of them. The barriers in the way are personal and political. Personal because we have to change our own attitudes. In the era of disarmament, we should not only talk about weaponry, but about disarming our own fear, suspicion, feelings of insecurity, or ignorance about others. And barriers are political, because what divides us are often only political party lines and ideological debates, which can feel so out of context and reality. Moreover, there are many political leaders who are just not willing and ready to be confronted by dissenting opinions and criticism. And so, being aware of how bizarre it sounds in a session of parliamentarians, we do need to depoliticize the issue of tolerance and inclusion. Politicians can and should argue about such matters as tax reforms, infrastructural regulations, or how we imagine the next 100 years of space exploration. But no one should be allowed to ever question equality and dignity, together with our right to identity of every single member of the society. The 2012 Quebec City Declaration, adopted by the 127th IPU Assembly, calls for a number of important measures that parliaments and parliamentarians should take in order to protect diversity both nationally and internationally, including in the field of legislation, policy making and education. And it underlines that you, distinguished parliamentarians, with your diverse constituencies, have the real potential to be the natural sentinels of peace. You can decide to actively reach out and include members of minority communities into your parties. And by working closely together, you can have better chances to win their trust and cooperation. You can initiate and incorporate social debate through parliamentary discussions and decisions. You can work together with local and religious leaders in the struggle against fundamentalism that can inflame tensions and lead to violence. And by exercising your budgetary oversight capacity, you can prevent the funding of projects and organizations that promote hatred and intolerance. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Minorities, which provides a unique and timely opportunity to reflect on the past achievements and to look forward to identify ways to further strengthen international standards on minority rights protection. In its preamble, the Declaration states that the promotion and protection of the rights of minorities contribute to the political and social stability of states, and emphasizes that the constant promotion and realization of such rights is an integral part of development of society and contributes to the strengthening of friendship and cooperation among peoples and states. So, distinguished delegates, let me conclude with the most basic article of human rights, which lays the foundation of our togetherness. It is the first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and please consider its words carefully. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. With this, I wish all of us a fruitful assembly and debate in a hope that we will commit ourselves to continue shaping our common future with reason and conscience and in a spirit of real sister and brotherhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Уважаемые
Distinguished colleagues, before we move on to the main part of our discussion, allow me to thank all those who already made intervention, I mean those experts, and let us applaud to them. And before we kick off our debate, I would like to make some announcements about the organization of our work. We have the list of speakers, and the list of speakers starts with the speakers of parliaments, and it's for us honor and pleasure to receive a great number of delegations from all over the world. We have a record attendance today. We have 96 speakers, 66 vice speakers from 156 countries that have come to attend the Assembly, and I believe you will come back to your home countries with very pleasant memories about the people of Russia and the work we are doing here now. I would like to say that we should work in accordance with rules and procedures, and so we had a draw on the list of speakers, and you can have the list of speakers. You can find it at the documentation desk. And the executive committee decided to reduce the time for speaking to 6 minutes. And the observer states can have 3.5 minutes at their disposal, and distinguished colleagues, I would like all speakers to stick to these rules. And from the rostrum you will speak from. There are 2 buttons. So yellow button will start flashing after 3 times, and red button will start flashing, which will mean that your time has finished. And I will make you stop, and I apologize in advance that I will use my duties, and we have got the information that 4 speakers are supposed to go back to their home countries. Therefore, I would kindly ask you to give the opportunity to these speakers to speak out of the list, and I would like to give the floor at 6 o'clock. The speakers of the Parliament of Azerbaijan and China, they will have 5 time at their disposal. I understand. I thank you for your understanding. I would like to remind you that some delegations have not included their names, their speakers onto the list. The list is open till tomorrow, Monday. Before 12 sharp at noon. And so I do agree with this decision, so the decision is adopted. Now I would like to remind the delegation that you are right to appoint one of your members is the deputy of the Assembly President. And I would kindly ask all delegations who haven't done as yet, please supply the name of your delegate who will run for this post, and I will share my duties with all deputies of the President. And upon the ending of the Assembly, on the both sides of the podium, you can find assistants, and through them you can hand over any of your info to me. Besides, you can find a list of speakers just in your files, and we have already the list consisting of 64 people. In the first row, there will be special seats for next speakers. So you should take the seat before your name is announced and before you're invited to the podium, in order to economize our time. And we kindly ask all delegates just to stick to the time frame so that all speakers from the list can make their presentations at the general debate. And now I would like to invite to the podium Mr. Jabouri, the Speaker of the Parliament of Iraq. And please, I would like kindly ask to get prepared Mr. Silurius, the Speaker of the Parliament of Cyprus. He will be the next to speak. Mr. Jabouri, please take the floor.
In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Your Excellency, President of IPU, Your Excellency, Secretary General, Your Excellency, President of the 137th Assembly of IPU, greetings from Iraq. I would like to greet you and greet your people. And I do hope that this assembly that is held in the Russian Federation will be an important milestone in adopting more rules and regulations that will further enhance cultural pluralism and peace around the world. We are witnessing many hotspots around the world that are a threat to these regions, but also a threat to international peace and security and development. Therefore, IPU and its member parliaments that represent the aspirations of their peoples should stand together and should face these challenges jointly in a way that would de-escalate violence anywhere around the world. And this can only be done by resorting to dialogue between all parties to any conflict, or all countries or all parties that may have an impact or an influence in a conflict. We should not resort to the use of force. We should always abide by the law and international resolutions and regulations. we realize that there are worrying trends around the world, that is to say ultra-nationalism, but also extremism and forces that are trying to control the main maritime passages and strategic straits in the world, and these are indeed very worrying. We should uphold the values of cultural pluralism, and this should be the basis to settle any conflict, any argument, be it economic or cultural, between countries. We should also rely on our common human heritage. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a very fortunate coincidence that this assembly coincides with the 20th anniversary of the Declaration on Human Rights. This declaration, which enshrines all values of love and brotherhood. And I should like to remind you that the civilization of Babylon in my country started and launched the first law in the world, and this law was the first pact between a ruler and his people. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not eradicate terrorism, we cannot establish democracy. I repeat, we must eradicate terrorism. The forces of darkness that Iraq has suffered from. Indeed, Iraq is in the first line of defense and has shed the blood of its children to defeat terrorism. Terrorism should be defeated and should be dealt with before it becomes a scourge that overshadows humanity and the world as a whole. I would like to convey to you the good news of the liberation of Mosul, and this is an important step towards the eradication of terrorism. We were able to free the entire city of Mosul. Again, I want to say that terrorism is not linked to a religion or a region. Terrorism is like a virus. It can spread anywhere, and it can infect any region around the world. It knows no boundaries. And if we do not eradicate terrorism, we will not be able to uphold democracy. And we cannot do so by relying on military action. Military action is important, but we need to focus on countering extremist ideology, which leads to more terrorism. And this requires an international effort that is done under the umbrella of the United Nations, but other specialized agencies as well. So we need to deal with the root causes of terrorism if we want to truly defeat terrorism. And I feel that the contribution of the international community in rehabilitating the cities in Iraq that were destroyed because of terrorism will be the best message that we can send to all terrorist groups. This message would be that they will not prevail. And I want to stress here that in Iraq we have a social compact that governs Iraq, and Iraq is a unified country in spite of the difficult circumstances. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate my thanks to the people and the leadership of the Russian Federation. I should like to thank them for their excellent hospitality. Again, I wish this assembly every success, peace, and God's blessing be upon you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you so much. And you stuck to your time allocated to you. It's a very good example that you have set for other speakers. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Siloris from Cyprus, and I would like Mr. Rokotomani from Madagascar to get prepared.
Great pleasure and attention. The previous speakers and especially the representative of young parliamentarians. In today's world, one could argue that cultural pluralism and peace through interfaith and interethnic dialogue constitutes one of the greatest challenges and ultimate goals of the international community. I'm referring to a notion of cultural pluralism which will not aim to intruding in our citizens' sense of belonging, national roots, culture and civilization, but rather enrich and add new perspectives and balances for them. It is true, however, that if not approached constructively in conclusive dialogue between different faith and ethnic communities, using the wrong language can lead to radicalization, parallelizing forms of conflict, and even violence. And unfortunately, we have all been witnessing, in particular over the last few years, an alarming rise of extreme nationalistic and xenophobic political discourse and subsequent terrorism and ideologically encourage violence in many parts of the world. We cannot build strong multicultural societies if we refuse to have reasonable conversation. We cannot plan a more peaceful future if the starting point is suspicion and mistrust. And we cannot build a pluralistic, prosperous world unless we listen to each other, work together, and learn to respect our differences. I therefore believe that it is time we push for an even greater and perhaps more radical change in the way we act in politics and beyond, in order to achieve the pluralistic societies we all envisage and aspire to. As lawmakers, we are called to lead by example and promote such legislation and policies that will not result in fear of anything and anyone different, but rather enrich tolerance, understanding, and readiness for constructive interfaith and interethnic dialogue. A dialogue that can ultimately lead to development, progress, pluralism, stronger democracies, and adherence to the rule of law. Dear colleagues, in today's world, people are faced with an overwhelming range of challenges: economic, demographic, migratory, and cultural. Challenges which is not carefully addressed can severely hamper any prospects for strong and healthy intercultural societies and peace around the globe. It is therefore imperative we reset our goals, policies, and strategies, starting from schools and reaching out to the eldest citizens. It is of paramount importance to develop, among other, a comprehensive intercultural strategy that will enhance and promote all those parameters that should reflect the important role of cultural pluralism, in turn leading to the achievement of peace. Coming from multicultural country, Cyprus, I can say that despite the Turkish invasion and occupation of part of our country since 1974, that affected social cohesion, we Cypriots managed to safeguard to a great extent respect of different people from different backgrounds. Throughout the ages, Cyprus was grown to be a mosaic of different cultures and religions, and that diversity has become our great strength. Esteemed colleagues, the capacity and willingness to generate and sustain dialogue across borders or any dividing lines are pivotal for advancing further on the road to peace, democracy, stability, and sustainable development. If we are to move from mere declarations to concrete approaches and practical actions, as we should, at international and national levels, now is the time to commit ourselves in this process. Our duty as parliamentarians is not only to work actively to adopt laws that combat racism and xenophobia or promote cultural pluralism and peace through interfaith and interethnic dialogue. Our duty is also to ensure that we work together in order to establish a culture of peace worldwide. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. Μιλάω ελληνικά λίγο. Ευχαριστώ.
Colleagues, I would like to remind all the participants that we have also the balconies where you can sit if you like. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Dramani from Mr. Togo, and next speaker will be Mr. Bablayan from Armenia. Ms. Dramani, please, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président de l'Union Inter-Parliamentary,
Mr. President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Madam President of this 137th Assembly of the IPU, ladies and gentlemen parliamentarians, Mr. Secretary General of the IPU, ladies and gentlemen. I should like, first of all, to join previous speakers in congratulating the President of the Assembly and the President of the IPU. Thank you for the great skill with which you are presiding over this successful Assembly. I should also like to take this opportunity to express the Togo delegation's thanks to the IPU and to the Russian Federation. Thank you to the Russian Federation for the very warm welcome being extended to us in the beautiful city of St. Petersburg. We very much appreciate the excellent organizational work behind this assembly. Mr. President, Madam President, I am delighted to take the floor today in the context of this general debate on promoting cultural pluralism and peace through interfaith and interethnic dialogue. I welcome the choice of this theme. It serves to highlight how significant dialogue is. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this assembly is all too relevant in today's world of violent extremism. My country, Togo, is a secular nation, and we have worked to promote dialogue and mutual understanding among our different faiths and cultures. Togo has adopted a number of laws which aim at fighting radicalism, terrorism, and other antisocial scourges. In May of 2004, we saw the creation of the Togolese Coalition for Cultural Diversity. The aim of this body is to promote cultural diversity by involving different national players involved across the arts and different cultures. In other words, the theme before us today is very topical, particularly with respect to Africa. Africa, which seems to have become the seat of inter-ethnic conflict. We see such conflicts breaking out against a background of hatred and conflict. We have to recognize that such disputes and conflicts are as old as humanity, but we must endeavor to avoid them in Africa, particularly now on the eve of the third millennium, when our ambitions are sustainable development and peaceful cohabitation in the interest of clear progress. We must ensure that rather than conflict, we find ways of ensuring that diversity is a source of mutual enrichment which serves humanity and ensures our ability to live together. Political and cultural dialogue are the ways of ensuring that we have a peaceful social and political lives and peace throughout the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, this assembly is taking place at a time of social and political crisis in my country. We are once again enduring the kind of crisis that we had in the 1990s. And other countries in Africa are also in crisis. We must recognize that we must ensure that we have universal suffrage as the way of ensuring a successful political dialogue. We must not allow for undemocratic practices which run against people's wish for democracy. We have had a crisis in Togo since August of this year, and this has led to the loss of life as well as great damage and disruption. We would like to acknowledge the contribution made by the Secretary General of the IPU, who recently came to Togo in order to promote dialogue among the groups in Togo in order to ensure that we can overcome the crisis which is now making life so difficult for the people of Togo. We believe in ensuring that there is dialogue that will involve all of the relevant players in Togo. I firmly believe that we will find a way of sorting out our difficulties with the grace of God, and that before too long. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Сейчас я
I now give the floor to Mr. Babloyan, the Speaker of the Parliament of Armenia, and the next speaker will be Mr. Kahraman from Turkey.
Distinguished Mrs. Matvienko, distinguished President of IPU, distinguished Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Above all, I would like to thank our Russian colleagues for hospitality and fantastic organization of IPU Assembly. For me, it's a great honor and pleasure to speak from this rostrum and give you my vision of the challenges that we are discussing today. The promotion of intercultural diversity through interfaith and inter-ethnic dialogue is a precondition for sustainable development of modern society. As the first Christian country in the world, being at the crossroads of cultures and religions, Armenia for centuries had a unique opportunity to communicate with other civilizations. Thanks to that cooperation, in Armenia you can find an ancient cathedral of Hellenistic era, plenty of the oldest churches, medieval Jewish cemetery, and unique mosque of the 18th century. We're completing in Armenia the construction of the largest Yazidi church in the world. These inter-civilizational links exist thanks to great respect by Armenian people to other cultures, religions, and traditions. Recently, we have taken steps in order to engage the representatives of national minorities in political processes in the Republic of Armenia. In accordance with newly adopted electoral code, the representatives of national minorities, Kurds, Russians, Yazidis and Assyrians were elected MPs of the national parliament. As of today, 2/3 of our people live outside Armenia. Those who managed to survive the genocide of Armenians by Ottoman Turkey dissipated all over the world. There where they have found their new home, they have set up viable, completely integrated communities, and at the same time they preserved their national identity. We're always pleased to hear about the contribution of Armenian diaspora it makes into the development of many countries of the world. Today, we're very much concerned about the fate of Armenian and other national and religious minorities in the Middle East, and especially in Syria. Crimes committed by terrorism in this region and national and religious soil have impact on our Armenian compatriots who have been from times immemorial an integral part of multi-ethnic, multicultural environment of the Middle East. Armenia has adopted more than 20,000 refugees from Syria and has become third largest in Europe country who adopted many Syrian refugees. And we lend a helping hand to those who need humanitarian help, and we provide humanitarian aid to Syria. Syrian crisis have deepened controversies in the Middle East and outside. We can stick to different opinions about the root causes and dynamics of these challenges. But we should be unified in our position. Any effort aimed at protection and rehabilitation of those who suffered, and especially communities who suffered, should be maintained despite different conflicts. Speaking about the development of intercultural pluralism and for peace and dialogue between civilizations and cultures, we immediately remember such notions as diversity, solidarity, and they facilitate each other. During the whole history, many civilizations have disappeared, and actually many cultures have been destroyed. And the idea of destruction of the cultures couldn't have happened unless intolerance and hatred had a fertile soil in those who are xenophobic. Unfortunately, today we are witnessing how Christian, Buddhist, and Islamic monuments are being destroyed in many countries. Recently, terrorists have blasted Armenian church of 40 martyrs of the 15th century happened. The same situation we see in Azerbaijan, where a unique Armenian Greek and Assyrian cultural heritage have been destroyed. Very many monasteries, churches, cemeteries, unique stone crosses were destroyed. The same situation we can see in Turkey, where our Armenian heritage is systemically destroyed. The policy of xenophobia and intolerance pursued by some countries prevent from peaceful resolution of protracted conflicts. One of these countries is Azerbaijan, which instead of taking effort in order to find peaceful settlement of conflict with Nagorno-Karabakh, have chosen the language of force, violence, military, and xenophobia. Baku denies any proposals. Mahatma Gandhi said that intolerance is a violation itself and prevents the development of democracy. Tolerance, respect for national, cultural, and religious heritage is one of the preconditions for harmonic and peaceful coexistence of peoples. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we give the floor to Mr. Kahraman, the Speaker of the Parliament of Turkey. And the next speaker will be Abdel Al from Egypt.
Please, Mr. Kahraman, please take a floor.
Saygıdeğer parlamentolar.
Distinguished President of IPU and the distinguished speakers of the parliaments, distinguished parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to greet each and every one of you with respect on behalf of the Turkish Grand National Assembly and extend the best greetings of the Turkish people. And I am very happy to have the opportunity to address you all in the city of St. Petersburg. And I would like to extend our positive remarks and thanks to the organizing committee. We are here to deal and talk about a very important topic, promoting cultural pluralism and peace through interfaith and inter-ethnic dialogue. This is a topic that we need to be dwelling upon in depth. No one single individual do not have the right to expose them, to undermine them, to look down on them, to discriminate them, and to exhort any kind of physical violence against them due to their differences. And it is a universal value that we need to have diversity. Race, color, and faith should not be any kind of factor for discrimination. Every individual is equal before the rights. We do have the principle of equality in our constitution, and our citizens do have their national culture and identity, and they do have the opportunity to get their cultures and origins living within their own preference. The previous two speakers that took floor before me necessitated me to clarify some points. The first one, the distinguished speaker that spoke on behalf of the Southern Cyprus. First of all, as a response, Turkey is not an invading country. Cyprus is not under occupation since 1974. We do have the Zurich agreements, and Turkey is a guarantor country. And Turkey, as a guarantor country, is present on the island. And this is a very wrong remark to say that this is an invasion, this is an occupation. This is wrong. And in 1974, there was a coup and there was an invasion that had been carried out on the island, and Turkey, as the guarantor country, exercised her rights as the guarantor country to avoid those things happening. And the speaker that took the floor before me is making the historical wrong thought continuing. Those events, and also the previous speaker who took the floor spoke about genocide. Those are historic events that need to be dwelt by the historians, which had not been a genocide. There is no pressure imposed on any kind of ethnic group, any kind of country or cultural identity. Turkey, you can be sure of that. And such a platform, just because that you don't like it, you can criticize. But the truth is unique. The truth is one. As Galileo told this, the world is turning, and those are the realities. Let us not mislead the truth and then talk about tolerance and utter beautiful words after talking about those kind of distorted truth. So the wrong expression and the wrong thoughts that were uttered before me, I had the obligation to correct them and express the truth. Distinguished participants, when we look at the problems that are repeating themselves in our age, there are xenophobia, racism, and extremism, and lack of tolerance as the reason. Right at the moment, discrimination and Islamophobia are now affecting the lives of many people, and that are being supported by the mainstreaming political parties and misleading the societies, and this needs to be avoided. This is what I believe. Due to the time limitation, and I'm running towards the end of my presentation, I need to be skipping some of the points that I've included in my presentation originally. But what I'd like to say is that as Turkey, in terms of establishing international peace and stability, we are doing our part of our responsibility. We are facing with a major threat, a tragedy, a major tragedy going on, and it is right next door to our country, and we'd always had an open door policy for them. Right at the moment in Turkey, we do have 3.2 million Syrian citizens, and also people who fled from international violence and international poverty, and in total we do have 3.4 million refugees who fled for their lives. We always open our doors who are under difficult condition, and we always provide them all the support we can for them. And it is right at the moment, as Turkey, we've spent more than $30 billion to help those refugees. And it is a pity that I'm not including the NGOs in Turkey spend a lot on the top of this $30 billion, but the international community had a very symbolic contribution. We are closely following the developments in Myanmar. And we are very much worried about the violence against the Rohingya Muslims, and the number of the Rohingya Muslims fleeing to Bangladesh exceeded 480,000. It is another dimension of this tragedy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while I'm concluding my words, let us not forget that cultural pluralism is a diversity, is a richness. It is important, the integrity and the moral values of the individuals, not their faith and ethnic origin. This is the most important thing, and I'd like to thank the organizers and our host once again. Thank you very much. My valuable friends, I would like to greet each one of you on behalf of the Turkish Grand National Assembly and on behalf of the Turkish nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now give the floor to Mr. Abdel Al, the Speaker of the Parliament of Egypt, and the next speaker will be Makama Lowo from Mozambique.
Mr. Sabir Chaudhry, President of the IPU, Madam Valentina Matvienko, President of the Federal Council, the Council of the Federation of Russia, ladies and gentlemen, heads and members of delegations, dear guests. At the outset, allow me to extend our gratitude and our deepest thanks to our dear friends and counterparts in the Council of the Federation and the Duma Council in the Russian Federation. We thank them for this invitation to come and take part in this dialogue on preserving pluralism and respecting multiculturalism. I have come to you all the way from Egypt. Egypt, a long-standing historical country with a long-standing tradition of peace, a country that has played a pioneer role in coexistence between various ethnicities and various minorities. These peoples and these communities have come together and coexisted for hundreds of years on both banks of the Nile River. Egypt has always been a safe refuge, starting with the sacred family in its historical journey 2,000 years ago. We have provided a safe refuge for many races and ethnic groups that came to us seeking better lives, seeking freedoms and safety. We have been a melting pot of cultures that have found a way to exude life and arts. The culture of tolerance is deeply enrooted in the Egyptian people. Therefore, we sent out a strong message of peace and coexistence to the international arena. Egypt was the first Arab country to sign a peace treaty with Israel. This peace treaty has been maintained for approximately 40 years. The Azhar Mosque, which is the most prominent religious institution in Egypt, has taken part in a long-standing religious dialogue with the Vatican, as well as a number of religious references and institutions internationally. I would also like to note that the world today needs the voice of reason, the voice of wisdom, to call for coexistence, peaceful coexistence between peoples in the face of terrorism, this scourge that has come to threaten and shake the very foundation of the human rights system, namely the right to life. Allow me to underline that the Islamic religion, Islam, is free and innocent of all accusations that have been targeting our religion because of the practices and mispractices of these terrorist groups. The message of Islam is peace and tolerance. Islam holds the utmost feelings of tolerance and brotherhood towards other religions. It is not an overstatement to say that the majority of victims of terror are Muslims themselves. Egypt has already voiced out its stance towards terrorism. We have already denounced terrorism. The 30th of January revolution was a message from Egypt to the world, a message that we will not agree to our country being divided along religious and ethnic lines. We told the world that we would like to preserve our heritage. Therefore, we passed the first law on the construction and reconstruction of churches in Egypt. The Egyptian people, Muslims and Christians alike, are joining forces and efforts to build a cathedral in our new central capital. The Egyptian government has taken charge of the costs of the reconstruction of the biggest synagogue in Alexandria to be reconstructed. This is the Byzantine historical capital of the cities and countries of the Mediterranean basin. Egypt did not suffice by giving the greatest example of coexistence and tolerance. We also were keen on striking the example for welcoming and receiving refugees and displaced persons that fled violence and conflicts in their own home countries. Egypt opened its doors, hosted these refugees, and offered them a peaceful and a safe refuge. The Egyptian people embraced them, the Egyptian people that does not know what hatred feels like, knowing that hatred and xenophobia has started to proliferate in Western countries in light of the increasing numbers of refugees. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of meetings that tackle the importance of coexistence and peaceful harmony between different ethnicities and minorities are gaining more and more significance, especially in order to lay the foundations for future initiatives to achieve cohesion. This very cohesion is the key to human development, innovation, openness, and this does not necessarily mean that we have to give up on our social stable principles. Quite the contrary, we have to hold on to our traditions and our constants, our customs that we have inherited. We have to hold on very tight to our identities in order to face the negative sequelae of globalization. Civilized societies embrace tolerance, pluralism, and openness to other cultures. Civilized societies refute the language of force and violence that go against their religious and societal values. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt highly appreciates and values the efforts that were exerted by the federal Russian government in order to consecrate these values. We highly value the efforts of Russia to maintain brotherly ties with other countries in refusing terrorism and violence. The Egyptian parliament always strives to cooperate and work closely with governments and parliaments that denounce terrorism, that denounce violence, and that seek to spread the culture of peace and coexistence in peace. In conclusion, I'd like to recall the principles stipulated by the Universal Declaration on Multiculturalism, issued in 2001. This declaration described pluralism as being a source of richness and a source of development, not in the economic term only, but also as a means to achieve intellectual and moral development, as well as spiritual and religious dignity. At the end, allow me to thank once again, on behalf of the Egyptian Parliament, Mr. Saber Chaudhry, for his endeavors and for all of the achievements that he has made throughout his mandate as President of the IPU. We wish him success in his future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now I invite to take the floor Madam Makama Khlovo, the Speaker of the Parliament of Mozambique, and I would like to ask to get prepared Mr. Vali from Oman.
Excellencies, President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Speakers of the Parliaments, distinguished members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it is with high esteem and consideration that we address all of you present in this noble room on the occasion of this General Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. We greet and thank the government and the Russian people, our hosts, for the warm welcome and exceptional reception. Thank you so much. Excellencies, we feel honored to be in this General Assembly, in which we are going to share ideas and experiences on promoting cultural pluralism and peace through interfaith and inter-ethnic dialogue, which are essential foundations for the well-being of our peoples. Excellencies, in order for our living together to be healthy, the dialogue between ethnic and religious groups must be permanent, responsible, and always aimed at overcoming differences and uniting even more, because it is by talking that we understand each other. Excellencies, the IPU has taken significant steps in adopting in 2012 the Declaration on Citizenship, Identity and Linguistic and Cultural Diversity in a Globalized World. With the adoption of this declaration, the IPU members stated their conviction that it is possible for people to coexist in the world with their differences as long as there is an awareness of solidarity and a serious and responsible dialogue between people of different cultures and civilizations. A world of harmony depends on our mutual acceptance, that we are equal and that our differences constitute the wealth and heritage of humanity, accepting that our differences are the source of progress and well-being of societies. Ladies and gentlemen, the Parliament of Mozambique, which with humbleness I represent here, is an example of a country in constant search for healthy and harmonious coexistence among brothers and sisters, engaged in the consolidation of peace, democracy and social welfare of its people. Our mission is to do all we can to be more united, regardless of our ethnic, cultural and religious differences, so that we may, together, continue to build the prosperity of the Mozambican people. For instance, our constitution defines Mozambique as a secular state, based on the separation between the state and religious entities. And the religious entities are free in their organization and in the exercise of their functions and worship, and they should do this in compliance with the law. The Mozambican constitution defends and values the activities of religious entities and their contribution to the promotion of national unity, peace, concord, tolerance, spiritual and material well-being of its citizens, and the economic and social development of the country. Furthermore, the Constitution contains the principle of universality and equality, stating that all citizens are equal before the law, they enjoy the same rights and are subject to the same duties, regardless of their race, sex, ethnic origin, place of birth, religion, degree of education, social status, marital status, occupation or political choice. Distinguished members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, in our opinion, our Parliament should continue to work in order to ensure the consolidation of a sound and responsible inter-ethnic and interfaith dialogue. We parliamentarians are interested to promote the conciliation and peaceful coexistence without discrimination, ensure that fundamental rights of citizens are protected, ensure that all religions are respected, ensure universal access to quality education that promotes civil rights, respect, equality, and intercultural and interfaith tolerance of cultures and religions, and to combat the hate speech, namely in public discourses and the social media. As legislators and representatives of the peoples, we are called to lead by example in building consensus, defending tolerance, harmony, and solidarity based on love to one another. As lawmakers, we should continue to establish legal frameworks which promote peaceful coexistence and avoid extremism, violence, and radicalism, thereby protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peaceful coexistence depends on the commitment of each and every one of us. Therefore, I would like to call on our parliaments to be bolder in legislating, evaluating, and monitoring actions to ensure respect for universal rights and the peaceful coexistence and harmony between peoples and countries. Excellencies, let us, together, make of our world a world where there is peace, harmony, solidarity, happiness, and well-being. For your kind attention, please accept my sincere
Asante sana, shukra, spasiba, e muito obrigada. Thank you so much.
Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Al-Mawali, the Speaker of Amman, and get prepared, Mr. Lammert from Germany.
In the name of God, most graceful, most merciful, peace and God's blessing be upon the Prophet Muhammad. Your Excellency, President of IPU, Excellencies, heads of delegations, MPs, Your Excellency, Secretary General of IPU, dear colleagues, members of delegations, again, peace and God's blessing be upon you all. At the outset, I would like to express my deep thanks and gratitude to the Russian Federation and to Russia's Federal Assembly with its Council of the Federation and State Duma for their excellent hospitality. I am very pleased to be in this beautiful city. We are indeed inspired by its ancient history and different artistic expressions. We would like to thank the President of IPU for extending an invitation to my delegation to participate in this 137th Assembly. We would like to thank all those who contributed to the excellent organization of this Assembly, namely the Secretary General and his team. No doubt this excellent organization will go a long way in adopting tangible resolutions that will be implemented in the field. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, tolerance is one of the core values of all religions. It encompasses the relationship between all civilizations, societies, and ethnic groups. Humanity was built on open-mindedness, on tolerance, on being able to forgive and forget. And this is what our religion, Islam, has always called for more tolerance and peaceful coexistence. And this was indeed included in the Holy Quran in several verses, namely, and this verse is translated loosely as, "We have made you peoples and tribes to know one another." The strengthening of the culture of dialogue, finding peaceful solutions for all conflicts, the peaceful resolution of all disputes and conflicts are the main pillars of diplomacy, but they are also the main human values that were also the foundation of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, today, more than ever, we have to uphold cultural pluralism. We have to uphold tolerance, and we must reject intolerance. Intolerance breeds hatred, and hatred breeds more conflicts, more wars that will only lead to the destruction of our beautiful planet and beautiful monuments. These are our core values in the Sultanate of Oman, for which our dear Sultan has called for ever since he ascended to the throne in 1970. And based on these core values, we have cooperated in the Sultanate of Oman with all populations and nations through the United Nations. And we built our cooperation on mutual understanding and common interests. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sultanate of Oman has had a pivotal role in upholding and strengthening cultural pluralism and peace. We have had many contributions in the field of cultural pluralism. We have established the Sultan Qaboos Center for teaching Arabic to foreigners, and we have many other centers to teach the Arabic language. The aim of establishing and building these centers is to build bridges of communication with other nations and countries that do not speak Arabic. Also, our Sultan has had many chairs and scholarships in many universities around the world, namely his chair in the University of Cambridge for monotheistic religions. Also, the Ministry of Endowment and Religious Affairs has a specific program that is called the Program of Tolerance. This program calls for establishing but also promoting the culture of peace and peaceful dialogue. We also organize many exhibitions around the world, mobile exhibitions that highlight and showcase the importance of religious tolerance. These exhibitions have visited about 65 cities around the world. Also, our Council for Culture and Science organizes a Science Week that focuses on dialogue between civilizations through science and culture. We have also issued the Culture Act, and we consider the first week of February of every year to be the week of religious tolerance and dialogue and interfaith dialogue, and this was promulgated through this law. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I should like to thank His Excellency the President of IPU for all his efforts in the service of IPU and his many achievements. I would like to thank each and every one of you, and I do hope that all our endeavors here will be crowned with success with the help of the Almighty. Peace and God's blessing be upon you all.
Я попрошу несколько слов сказать господина Чаудхури.
Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Chowdhury. Say a couple of words, please.
Madam President, I just, before the next speaker, who is going to be Mr. Lammert from Germany, I just wanted to say a few words about him, especially for those who are coming to the IPU for the very first time. This, unfortunately, is going to be his last assembly. He has been a great champion of the IPU for the values and the standards and the aspirations of the IPU. He has attended all of our assemblies for the past 15 years. When we had the preparatory meetings for the Speakers Conference in New York, he was a very powerful voice. He articulated our position very well. I have certainly learned a lot from him. I'm grateful to him for all of the support that he has extended to the IPU, and I think the IPU also owes him a huge debt of gratitude. I just wanted to share those personal reflections because he has been a great champion, a great parliamentarian, and of course a very highly regarded and well-respected Speaker of the Bundestag. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
I now give the floor to Mr. Lammert, the Speaker of the Bundestag, Germany. Please, Lammert, you have the floor.
Excuse me. Подготовиться Нигмат.
And the next speaker will be Mr. Nigmatulin.
Okay, please start.
Madam Chair, Mr. President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I also want to thank our Russian hosts for inviting us to St. Petersburg, which is indeed a particular place for a parliamentary assembly, as President Putin and our President, Mr. Chowdhury, have explained last night. As a German citizen, I appreciate the strong historical relations between Russia and Germany over centuries. And as a German parliamentarian, I am aware that St. Petersburg during the Second World War suffered severely from German troops with an unbelievable amount of civilian victims. In this context, I would like to remind us that it is just today, 27 years ago, that the Nobel Prize Committee announced that Mikhail Gorbachev would be awarded the Peace Nobel Prize, honoring his personal contribution to overcome the Cold War in Europe and to establish a new architecture of peace and freedom under which the reunification of Germany became possible. This conference is indeed, as our President kindly mentioned, this conference is for me indeed the last participation, and so you please allow me that I combine my thanks for a lot of friendly contacts and cooperation over a long time with some remarks on my observations and experiences. We all together call ourselves parliamentarians, but we should be aware that we work under significantly different working conditions. There are countries with free elections and others without, both within the IPU. We have countries with fair competition between a plurality of parties and candidates, and countries without. We have countries with open or restricted access to public offices and parliamentary mandate. We have countries with independent courts or without, with freedom of press or with censorship. There are many countries in which parliaments oversee the work of government, and several others where government controls parliament. Dear colleagues, we all have to evaluate ourselves to which extent we meet our own claims of serious parliamentary democracy. And we cannot deny that within the last decade, a remarkable number of IPU member states have fallen back and behind indispensable principles. Ladies and gentlemen, this general debate is mainly about cultural pluralism. Cultural pluralism begins at home. It is not convincing to applaud pluralism in general and to prevent artists, intellectuals and journalists at home from using pluralism, from demonstrating pluralism, which happens in many countries of the world, including IPU member states. Unfortunately, also in Russia. I will mention two prominent different cases. There is Kirill Serebrennikov, a famous theater and opera director, who is under home arrest since a couple of weeks and being confronted with astonishing accusations. There is Ole Sentsov, a famous filmmaker who already has been sentenced to 20 years of prison. And by the way, who is already an issue in our own Human Rights Committee of the IPU. I will express on behalf of the German delegations our solidarity with people like Serebrennikov and Sentsov and all other people wherever in the world which are under pressure of political authorities because they demonstrate cultural pluralism. Dear colleagues, the IPU is about democracy. Democracy for everyone, as we proudly announce. By the way, this is the difference between the IPU and the United Nations. The United Nations is not about democracy, but about cooperation of states independent of their political systems. IPU is about democracy, and democracy necessarily means pluralism. And this is indeed our promise and our common obligation, to make pluralistic democracy available for everyone. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Dankeschön. Я сейчас
I now give the floor to the Speaker of the Parliament of Kazakhstan, Mr. Nigmatulin, and the next speaker will be Господин Farrugia from the Speaker of the Parliament of Malta. Honorable Chairman, distinguished members of the Assembly, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me on behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Kazakhstan to greet all the Assembly participants and express a deep gratitude to the Russian Federation and primarily to Ms. Valentina Matvienko for the warm welcome and organizing this forum at the highest level. Today's event is a great platform to share opinions and experience to seek solutions for the most pressing challenges of the day. Distinguished colleagues, over the 25 years of our country's independence, the President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, has always viewed issues related to strengthening interfaith and inter-ethnic accord as the cornerstone of domestic policy of our state. Being a multi-ethnic country, Kazakhstan has formed and has been successfully developing its own model of inter-ethnic and interfaith dialogue. What are the main principles of this model? First and foremost, its constitutional and legal framework. The legislation and regulations of Kazakhstan guarantee to every citizen of the country equal opportunities regardless of ethnic and confessional identity. Moreover, any actions that threaten or undermine inter-ethnic or interfaith accord are viewed as illegal in our countries. As you know, colleagues, religious and ethnic conflicts create conditions which foster the spread of terrorism. Terrorism knows no borders and is a threat for the whole civilized world. This is why, back in 2015, the President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, in his speech at the 70th session of the UN General Assembly, has proposed and put forward several initiatives aimed at countering international terrorism and creating a global counter-terrorist coalition, the UN-led coalition. And today we call on parliamentarians to support the initiative that was put forward by the President of Kazakhstan on developing a code of conduct for creating a terrorism-free world. I'm convinced that this will become a significant contribution of the global parliamentary community to the struggle against one of the world's most dangerous scourges of the 21st century. The second principle of our international accord model is about culture and languages. As I said, Kazakhstan is a multi-ethnic country where we have 130 ethnic groups and we have created favorable conditions for all of them. Studies in schools in Kazakhstan are provided, education is provided in Russian and in the Kazakh languages. We also offer education for minorities in Tajik, Uzbek and Uyghur languages. We have 33 Sunday schools for learning German, Ukrainian, Tatar, Korean and other languages. Apart from Kazakh and Russian languages, we publish books in Ukrainian, Polish, German, Korean, Uyghur, Turkish and Dungan languages and a number of other languages. And besides Kazakh and Russian theaters, we have 4 other national theaters, an Uzbek theater, an Uyghur, Korean and German theaters. And the last 3 are the only ones within the CIS. So in Kazakhstan, we have all the conditions in place for promoting all the cultures and languages of all the ethnicities that live in our country. The third principle is the formation of effective institutes of inter-ethnic accord. We have for 22 years an effective instrument, the Assembly of the Peoples of Kazakhstan. One of the key qualities of this assembly is that the Assembly is represented in the Parliament of the Republic of Kazakhstan. 9 parliamentarians in our Parliament represent various ethnic groups. In our opinion, this experience of having this assembly of the peoples could be a valuable model that could be useful for other countries. The fourth element in strengthening the principles of tolerance in Kazakhstan is interfaith dialogue. We have 3,600 religious organizations that represent 18 confessions. So Islam, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Roman Catholic Church are all represented, along with Buddhism and other major religions. We have all the conditions in place for promoting peaceful dialogue, interreligious dialogue, and promoting cooperation between various religious organizations. I would like to mention an initiative by the President of Kazakhstan on conducting a Congress of the leaders of world and traditional religions to promote dialogue between them. As you see, participants in the forum, Kazakhstan had a lot to share in terms of experience in promoting pluralism and intercultural cooperation. This positive experience could be used by other member states of the IPU. I'm convinced that we will have very fruitful discussions during this assembly and that we will make a lot of progress in intercultural dialogue. I would like to wish us every success. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, distinguished colleagues. As we have agreed before, we give the opportunity to speak two speakers. We give the opportunity to speak two speakers, 5 minutes. They will speak out of order. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Farrugia, the Speaker of the Parliament of Malta, and get prepared the Speaker of the Korean Parliament. 5 minutes you have at your disposal, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Excellency, Madam Valentina Malvenchio, colleagues, honorable members. On this occasion, I want to express my heartfelt thanks to the Russian Federation for the excellent organization of this event. However, I must make a very clear statement. Every religion, every church in the world has the duty to seek peace. The Constitution of the Republic of my country, Malta, although it asserts that the religion of the state is Roman Catholic Apostolic religion, yet in the same Constitution, although Malta is indeed predominantly strong Catholic, however, Malta is also a tolerant nation in the Mediterranean, and where those belonging to different faiths, even without faith, live peacefully, respectfully, respect their cultural and religious diversity which surrounds them. Despite being a relatively homogeneous society, one can find in Malta places of worship for a considerable number of faiths and denominations. This clear case of open society also made it possible for my country, as an example, to embrace the large influx of both legal and irregular migrants reaching our island. Malta's demographics and society in general have been influenced by this ethnically diverse influx of immigrants, and the government of Malta has just announced, just a week ago, that it will be launching a massive action plan together with the stakeholders in order to facilitate the integration in the coming year, which will be discussed in my parliament in the coming days. So, my friends, we as legislators need to make sure that discrimination is adequately tackled in our national laws. The human spirit is a blank slate at birth upon which experience imprints knowledge. That is the tabula rasa philosophy. No one is born intolerant with prejudice in their hearts. Hate is learned, and politicians must do everything in their power to outlaw discrimination and bigotry, while promoting a culture which embraces interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Furthermore, Politicians must act to raise awareness not only on the rights and obligations relating to diversity, but also on the benefits spearheading the development of equality policies in order to achieve real change in the area of anti-discrimination laws. Colleagues, there are hundreds of religions in the world. We heard them. Many of them should represent here in this plenary. But we only have one word in which to coexist. Just one word we have. All religions have a core set of values that are identified with human morals, which can be considered as universally good. Thus, a multicultural society where everyone's rights are respected is a must to have a harmonious society. A multicultural society where everyone's differences are celebrated is a healthy society. Hence, politicians must lead by example themselves, and for this reason one must be more attentive on how we engage the public on these issues. Religion should not at any time be construed as the raison d'être of conflict or war. We live in a time where many people try to deceive or the others by claiming that the road of peace is paved with the denunciation of religion. This is wrong. This is not the case. Terrorism has no religion. Interfaith couples are a clear example of that. Thus, religions and denominations are themselves diverse and evolve over time. However, their spiritual foundation remains uniform and universal. This is not to say that interfaith dialogue is not difficult, as times challenging. It has to do with the difference between the particular and the universal. The values upon which religions are founded are universal and do not divide, but unite. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I'd like to give the floor to the Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Chan Se-kun. So the floor is yours.
Honorable fellow speakers and delegates, good afternoon to you all. My name is Hong Se-gyun, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. At the outset, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Her Excellency Valentina Matvienko, Chairperson of the Council of Federation, His Excellency Vyacheslav Volodin, Chairman of the State Duma, Honorable Saber Hussein Chaudhary, President of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chungong, Secretary General of the IPU, for their hard work to organize the IPU Assembly here in St. Petersburg. Countries around the world have been suffering from brutal terrorist attacks by extremist groups. As a root cause of terrorism, experts often point to neglected voices of the marginalized over many issues, which are including economic inequality and job crisis, which are considered to be a byproduct of cultural diversity and multiculturalism. The Korean people have cherished a shared sense of identity, which has been shaped over thousands of years based upon the same root and culture. Recently, however, Korean society has been moving in a different direction due to the steady influx of migrant workers and an increasing number of international students and marriage migrants. Korea has been making a rapid transition to multi-ethnic and multicultural society. Against this background, there are now growing calls in Korea for the need to accommodate diverse cultural values and beliefs and to seek a solution to conflicts caused by differences. In this respect, Koreans can learn a great lesson from the Quebec City Declaration adopted by the IPU Assembly in 2012, which highlighted the role of parliaments in protecting diversity at the national level. The declaration recommends parliaments to enact legislation and adopt political measures to strengthen acceptance of diversity among different social groups, nurture mutual respect and friendship among human beings, and enhance the effective participation of diverse groups in decision-making process. As the follow-up, to the declaration, the Korean National Assembly enacted the Act on Protection and Promotion of Cultural Diversity in 2014 to ensure that the government provides assistance and training related to this endeavor. Honorable delegates, I would also like to introduce you to an initiative that Korea has implemented since 2012 as a channel of communication for resolving cross-cultural misunderstandings and conflicts. We call it the Rainbow Bridge Project, which refers to a colorful arch bridging cultural gaps between migrants and local residents. This is a state-financed project designed to create opportunities for migrants to contribute to community development. It also helps local governments to establish and implement policy for migrants depending on their own specific circumstances regarding issues such as human rights, education, and healthcare. However, there's no doubt that projects of this kind alone cannot resolve all cross-cultural conflicts occurring around the world. To address a wide range of conflicts in a multicultural environment, we must change our perception in a way that we embrace our differences, which are seen as the ultimate cause of conflict. We need to move beyond discourse and legislative measures to build an environment where accepting and respecting differences become parts of our everyday life. Only then we will be able to protect and promote cultural diversity and achieve a lasting peace in our societies. At a venue like this, where we discuss how to contribute to a more peaceful world, I cannot help but mention North Korea's latest nuclear test and its unceasing missile launches, which pose a grave threat to peace on the Korean Peninsula and beyond. In the previous assembly in Dhaka, Bangladesh, I asked for your support for the effort to deal with the issue concerning the Korean Peninsula within the framework of the IPU. Let me once again seek your support and cooperation as we strive to convince North Korea to stop its provocative actions and return to the negotiating table at the earliest possible time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada, caros colegas.
Within the framework of the right for a reply, Mr. Makhanov, you have to enjoy this right for reply. From your seat, please. Distinguished colleagues, I can't help commenting on the intervention of the Speaker of Bundestag of Germany, Mr. Lammert, since it is apparent that you manipulate notions, democratic principles and human rights. On the one hand, Mr. Lammert was speaking about that. On the other hand, what in fact is happening, it is the equality of all before the law. And Mr. Serebrennikov, who was mentioned by Mr. Lammert, is a participant of a criminal case, and he's alleged of stealing state resources. And all civilized country should punish such people for such a sort of crimes, Germany included. Today and tomorrow we will be discussing a draft resolution on democracy. And at today's sitting, a number of delegations raised the issue of not using pseudo-democratic slogans for biased interference in the sovereign state of affairs of certain countries. So there haven't been yet court hearings, but our colleagues allow themselves such kind of comments. Currently, the investigation is underway, and it is a criminal case. I would like to underscore it. Thank you very much indeed. The first sitting of our assembly has been completed. I'm sorry for keeping you here for extra time. I thank you for your patience, and I would like to extend thanks to our interpreters who have been working since early morning and do an excellent job. I would like to inform you sorry, Cyprus has the right for reply. 1 minute you have, Cyprus, from your seat, please.
I'm sorry I have to intervene. I will take only half a minute because we're talking about obvious things. Turkey has in Cyprus 40,000 troops. They were invaded 20th of July 1974. Any pretext, I think, is unjustified, and there are the decisions of United Nations about the troops and about all the violence of human rights in Cyprus, the destruction of ancient monuments, churches, and the change of demographic character, even the Turkish Cypriots. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. I would like to advise you that at our sitting, 148 national delegations took part in our sitting, and the quorum is 75 delegations. Therefore, it was a legitimate sitting. Dear colleagues, at 2:30 we will resume our discussion of general debate in accordance with the list of speakers. At 5 p.m. the Assembly will consider item 2 of the agenda and will decide on inclusion of emergency item on the agenda. I would like also to brief you that the first speaker after lunch, a general debate, will be Mr. Kondiana from Guinea. Bon appetit and take short break. Thank you.